Hello, my name is Brian of Hudson's County, and I'm glad that you could join us again today for another TTRPG Talk. This series takes a look at tabletop role-playing games and related materials, suggests ideas for some of your own games, or looks at some of my own materials. Today's video is in response to the lesser-loved Dice Jam that was announced by Mama Newt of Lucky Newt Games. This game jam will run until the end of November. Its objective is to promote the creation of games that feature the use of lesser use dice from the traditional polyhedral dice set. A big recent SRD in the indie scene that uses these dice is the D4 based Caltrip Core SRD. However, there are lots of others that have been released over the years, therefore I've decided to use this first month of the jam in order to try to feature some SRDs and example games that rely on these lesser used dice to help and inspire some of my fellow creators. To start, we will feature an SRD that I actually know rather well and have used successfully several times, the Bad Times SRD. Please note that I have previously written a blog on this SRD, so you can find the link to that down below if you would rather read about this SRD rather than watch or listen. Now let's get underway. The Bad Times SRD was originally created by Kyle Tam of Oriana Games, utilizing only the D4. It was originally developed to run Kyle's game End of the Line, which was inspired by the Final Destination series of movies. If you've never watched them before, that series of movies, it's sort of like a horror series that focuses on characters trying to outrun death because they had a near-death experience that they weren't supposed to survive. In my opinion, a game that utilizes this system to its fullest is one where the characters are destined to eventually fail rather disastrously, or have horrible, terrible things happen to them as a result of a combination of bad decisions, mistakes, and unfortunate circumstances that just stack on top of each other until eventually those catastrophic results set in. Basically, the Jenga tower falls down. At end of the line, this means death for the characters at the hands of, well, death. In my own game, Heavens of Kefre, it actually meant that the AI characters were temporarily despawned from the MMO game world that they lived in, but could return during the next moment of calm that occurred during the course of the narrative. In a crime or a spy novel or drama that you might be creating, maybe your character is not killed, but instead is arrested or forced to go into hiding or ends up flipping and working for the other side. Disastrous consequence, however it comes, we need to make it satisfying. Whichever way you seek to approach your own game, the mechanics of the SRD are built around these pools of four-sided dice with an unchanging target number of 7 for success. The Bad Time dice system is a roll under system, which means you don't succeed if you get a 7 or above, rather you succeed when you get a 7 or below. This also reflects in the stats, in that the higher a character's stats are, of which there are typically 5, you actually have to roll fewer dice. So basically, the worse your stats, the more dice you roll, meaning the less likely it is you will succeed. As I just mentioned, with a starting stat of 0, you will roll a pool of 4 four-sided dice. This makes failure quite likely. That being said, the chances of success do increase quite rapidly. If that were the only part in the game that is trying to take out your character, then things might not seem so bad, but we need to make this a bad time, so of course it's not the only mechanic working against your character. That comes in the form of 2 additional elements that we are adding to this dice mechanic. The first is that if your character rolls a 16 or higher at any time at all, then your game's catastrophic event happens to the character. Now, some of you might have noticed that I said 16 or higher, but a 16 is the highest that you could possibly roll on a pool of 4 four-sided dice, right? And if I'm rolling 3 or 2 four-sided dice, then I can't fail at all. At least not that badly, right? Well, unfortunately, you're wrong. This is because each time any character, fails a check, then they add a +1 modifier to all future rolls. This could be an individualized pool, admittedly for each character, but most of the examples out there that I've seen or created actually uses a shared pool for the whole table. In Heavens of Kefre, these sort of +1 modifiers were called bugs, that because they were disrupting the server, making it more likely that the server would need to sort of self-correct and basically do bad things to our AI characters in order to make the game more fair for the human players. You could potentially make it so that this pool could also potentially reduce depending upon actions of your players. Um, but quite often, the only thing that will reset this pool is something bad happening to a character. So then the pool will like reduce part way or maybe all the way and then start going back up again. Now, let's say that I've made my deadly game and someone dies pretty early on. Might happen sometimes because of an unlucky, you never know, maybe that very first roll, someone rolls a 16. How do I resolve this situation? How do I design for death? Well, you could have some sort of respawning or regenerating thing inside of your game for your players, where basically death is only a temporary reprieve from the chaos of whatever's going on in the game. Instead of doing that, Kyle actually suggests in the SRD that you create some mechanics where the character can still influence what happens from beyond the grave or whatever purgatory they've been sent to. In End of the Line, deceased characters become ghosts that have the power once per play phase, or basically once per scene, to sort of reach in and allow another player to re-roll. In Heavens of Kefre, I manifested this through the despawned AI holding in a sort of waiting room because it's an MMO, so they're just holding in a waiting room waiting to be allowed back in. But while they're in that waiting room, they are able to occasionally change the code of the game in order to try to assist their companions. You could also have this manifest through flashbacks, like those found in Blades of the Dark, maybe, allowing the character basically to basically say, "Oh, well, I did X, Y, Z earlier," in order to give the rolling character a chance of a reroll to their benefit, or in some rare circumstances, maybe to foil their best efforts. You never know. Your players might end up starting to undermine each other, or might even be encouraged to occasionally backstab one another in this way, if it were like a fiasco or paranoid style game. Thank you very much for joining me today. As I mentioned previously, this is sort of like the first in a series that's going to be taking a look at SRDs that feature uh, the lesser used dice with the intention of using it as a suggestion for the particular jam that I mentioned. Links to the jam, the SRD, both on itch and on Fari RPG, the blog post that I mentioned, both the End of the Line game and the Heavens of Kefre game of mine that I mentioned that I made using this system. All of those will be found in the description down below, along with any other relevant links that I feel might be helpful for you. Now, go out there and make your game.
If you'd like to see more material on this topic, please feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel or check out the blog at hessenscounty.com.